Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Time-Crossed Lovers in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 31, Working Together Again. The days go by quickly. Byleth enjoys her time with Suthies in the Abyss. No one recognizes her, and it's a nice break from the rumors that have been following her since Fhirdiad. After everything, she's really looking forward to returning to the army's current encampment and seeing her father. They are looking through some books. So many have been banned from Garreg Mach's library. Are you sure you don't wish to look for your mother? Byleth isn't sure what she personally thinks of going to see Satrai. She never really thought about having a mother. Her father had always been more than enough. It's not like she misses the woman either. How can you miss someone you never knew? Regardless of her feelings, though, it's too dangerous. What if Rhea visits while they are there? What if Ylfric stumbles upon them? It's too great a risk. I suppose going to see a corpse might have been morbid anyway. Suthies sighed. Perhaps we can return at a later date with your father. He deserves to know. That is true. Byleth has long wished to tell him everything. She just doesn't know how. How do you tell someone that you've had to redo about 7 years of your life? Or about Suthies and the origins of crests? It's not like she has proof to back up her claims. He has long suspected that Rhea did something to you when you were born. We could still figure out a way of letting him know he was correct. That is true. If Geralt knew what they suspect Rhea had planned for Byleth, his reaction would not be good. At the very least, he would probably attack the woman. While Byleth would appreciate the sentiment, it would not help their situation. She's already worried enough that Dimitri might do something drastic if Rhea pushes too hard, and unlike Geralt, Dimitri doesn't have a wholly negative view of the Archbishop. Byleth will never forget learning that her father, the strongest person she knows, was terrified of the woman. We walk a fine line. At least we will be leaving soon. Getting away from Garreg Mach will at least mean we don't have to hide as much. I cannot say I am not looking forward to that. Byleth puts a book away and begins searching for another. There are many things to consider, but she is looking forward to leaving as well. Dimitri is also likely to feel relief at their departure. He's been increasingly worried about the Archbishop's intentions after all. It would probably be a good idea to tell him their theory about what exactly Rhea had planned for her, but Byleth is worried that may set him off. I can understand that. The boy is exceedingly protective of you, and what we suspect is terrifying, to put it bluntly. Still, he should know what the possible dangers are. Suthies huffs. Perhaps you should tell him after we leave. If the danger to you is not present, his anger might be more easily reined in. That's probably the smart way to go about it. Dimitri feels relief when he and Byleth are mounting their horses in the stables of Garreg Mach. Lady Rhea had asked a few more questions about Byleth since their previous discussion. They seemed simple and banal. If he wasn't already aware of the nature of the Archbishop's interest in his beloved, he probably wouldn't have suspected a thing. Instead, it just put him on the alert. He cannot help but worry. Byleth doesn't deserve to be one of Lady Rhea's pawns. Dimitri isn't entirely sure what the Archbishop's aim was when she placed Suthies' heart in his beloved's body, but he doubts it was completely altruistic. Would the Archbishop give up and leave Byleth be if she discovers that Suthies was alive within Byleth? Dimitri doubts it. Few people give up after over 20 years of work. He is afraid that if things go poorly, Lady Rhea may demand to keep Byleth in Garreg Mach. Dimitri is not sure if Lady Rhea can actually do that, but he is worried about it, nonetheless. Byleth would be miserable stuck here. Dimitri is aware that Fhirdiad wouldn't exactly be the best fit for her either, but he is planning on working to make her stay pleasant should she agree to remain with him. King Dimitri, is everything all right? He looks to his left and sees Byleth staring at him. It is odd to hear her use his title, but they are surrounded by people, so it is a wise thing to do. Yes, sorry. He urges his horse forward. Everyone is waiting so he can lead them out of the monastery. I was lost in thought. Byleth follows closely behind him. Is there anything you'd like to share? Dimitri cannot help but smile. I am simply relieved to finally be on our way. I am eager to return to the others. Didu is probably worried sick by now. Byleth was silent but nodded in agreement. She was likely just as eager to leave. Lady Rhea might have been subtly hounding him, but Byleth was the one in danger. Before meeting back up with the army, they end up needing to go back to Fhirdiad. Dimitri needed to retrieve his hero's relic, and some lords apparently still have business to discuss with him. Byleth is reasonably certain someone will always have business they at least deem as important, but it isn't her place to tell Dimitri how to do his job. Eventually Byleth finds herself in the courtyard where she and Dimitri spoke after they had liberated the city from Cornelia. She hasn't had much to do since they arrived and had been stargazing with Suthies. Byleth isn't sure how long she had been standing in the cold, but it was long enough for Suthies to fall asleep. The next thing she knew, a cloak was being draped across her shoulders and Dimitri was standing beside her. How was tonight's meeting? He should have been finished hours ago. Byleth hadn't even seen Dimitri at dinner. Some work was completed, but since we got here the meetings haven't even been about important topics. Dimitri sighs. I have no idea why they insisted on seeing me, let alone dragging things out for so long. Byleth tilted her head to the side. What was this last one about? The important topics we discussed were about planning a later time to figure out to do with the lands once held by the Western Lords. I agree that I need to decide what to do with them, but that is a judgment that does not need to be made now. Dimitri stretches his arms before continuing. Currently, the nearest lords are looking after the lands and people. That cannot last forever, but I'd prefer not to make any drastic changes until after the war is over. Any alterations now could be detrimental for the people. I do need to appoint new lords for the territories, but I haven't worked out the details yet. The lords were likely trying to convince Dimitri to give them more land during the meeting then. Though I am confused about something. Dimitri crossed his arms and looked at her contemplatively. In a number of our recent meetings, including tonight's, many of the lords keep bringing up how they have daughters, nieces, granddaughters, or the like who are around my age. I am aware of that already. He looks horribly confused. I have no idea why they continue to bring up the subject. Byleth cannot help the laughter that follows. How can one person be simultaneously so smart and yet so oblivious? It's almost adorable. Why are you laughing? Dimitri narrowed his eyes. I fail to see what is so funny. Byleth contains her laughter and looks over at him. The lords who persist on the subject of their young female relatives obviously want a family member to marry the king and have his crest babies. The look of realization on Dimitri's face is priceless and Byleth starts laughing again. How did I miss that? A blush overtakes his face. Now that you say it, it is terribly obvious. Some of them weren't even being subtle about it. One mentioned how eager his granddaughter was for the war to end so she could start a family. Dimitri shakes his head. I do tend to be oblivious in a romantic sense to any woman who isn't you, my beloved. Still, I should have picked up on something so obvious. Byleth's laughter halted. He really was adorable. She wishes Dimitri would move on already, but Byleth supposes under different circumstances she would find his devotion admirable, maybe even flattering. Dimitri feels foolish. How could he not have realized what the real topic being pushed on him was? It was just ridiculous. What have you been up to today? I hope things have been less awkward. He wants Byleth to have a positive view of his home. Byleth tightened his cloak around her shoulders. I was feeling especially tired today, so Suthies, and I napped and then did some reading in our room. Now that she mentions it, Byleth does look tired. She hadn't been doing anything particularly strenuous, especially for her. Perhaps the cold weather was getting to her. If need be, I can ensure that your room has a fire in it by the time you retire again. That probably wasn't enough though. Dimitri knew that Byleth could easily light a fire on her own. I can also arrange for a hot drink to be delivered to you. I'm fine, Dimitri, you don't need to go that far. She looked up at the sky. I actually wanted to apologize about something. We've had many discussions about the state of our relationship and the future. Her fists tightened on the cloak. I still stand by what I've been saying, but I haven't been helping things either. I have some clear ideas of what our obstacles are, but never put much thought into how to overcome them. Dimitri was not expecting that. Still, he isn't blameless in it all. I should also offer apologies. I kept saying I was listening, That I understood, but I did no more than talk. I rarely acted, and when I did not consult you. Which in turn caused more problems. He'd also failed to notice her various struggles right under his nose. So, what now? We figure out a way for us to hopefully come out of this happy. Byleth shrugged. Not that that will be easy. Things never are with them. Well, going forward I will be more realistic and not rely on our love being enough. If I have any plans, even if they are incomplete, I will try and share them with you. If he'd done that before, they could have probably figured out a way for her to interact with the others. Byleth nodded. I will try to stop being so pessimistic about our chances. She looks over at him. I cannot promise I will always succeed, but I will do my best to attempt to deal with the challenges we are facing. Finally. They were finally making progress. He and Byleth were finally working together. We could start right away. There is so much we need to do. Dimitri cannot remember the last time he felt so excited. We need to figure out what to do about the rumors, our positions, the church, the dot. Dimitri, Byleth cuts him off, not now. We are literally out in the open where anyone could hear us, and there are nobles close by who want you to marry their daughters. The last thing we need is people finding out what is going on and giving us even more problems to work with. She is keeping her voice low. If we want any chance of this working, we need to play smart, not hard. Byleth shakes her head. I still don't think it will end the way you would like it to, and I don't want to add more challenges to our already long list. That was fair. Dimitri got overly excited again. His beloved had a much cooler head than him and he needs to heed her warnings. If the wrong person caught on to the fact that he was in love with and wished to marry a mercenary, it would become even more difficult to achieve his goals. It will be hard to not show his excitement at the two of them finally working together on this, but he will do his utmost best to do so. Byleth deserves that and so much more from him. Of course, you are right as always. They really couldn't afford any more problems. We will have to find ways to speak in private. There was always the possibility that they could simply wait until they next met in their dreams. Suthies might have some good insights as well. The goddess was smart and loved Byleth, so she was sure to have ideas. They just had to be patient. When Byleth went to sleep that night, she found herself in the Blue Lions classroom. It looked as if class had just ended. There were battle formations written on the blackboard, open books and papers were left everywhere, and many of the chairs were pulled out. All of them were empty but one. Dimitri smiled at her and put his notes down. It has been a while since we had one of these dreams, hasn't it, Byleth? I suppose. She can't confidently recall when the last one was. This is good timing though. I've been needing to tell you something but did not want to risk being overheard. Dimitri immediately rushed over to her and took her hands into his. Are you all right? Has someone bothered you? Do you need anything? I am well, there is just something I think you should be aware of going forward. How to word this? Suthies and I have an idea of what Rhea wanted from me when she put Suthies' heart in my body. What do you think the reason is? He tightens his grip on her hands. Byleth takes a deep breath. She might as well get this over with, there is no way she can word this that won't result in Dimitri getting angry. You already know Suthies can take over my body as needed. Not that they do that often. We think Rhea may have wanted that to be not so temporary. Dimitri's eyes widen. When she wanted you to sit on the throne, she wasn't expecting you to have a revelation from the goddess, was she? His voice is eerily calm. That is what we suspect. Unfortunately, unless we speak with Rhea, I doubt we'll know for certain. Dimitri nods in understanding and lets go of her hands. He then walks up to one of the desks and flips it over. It breaks in half with a loud crack. That is not going to happen. No, it's not. Regardless of what Rhea may desire, Suthies doesn't want to use my body like a puppet. She puts a hand on his shoulder and is relieved when Dimitri doesn't shake it off. I am not in danger of losing myself like that. What Rhea wants does not matter, Suthies would have to consent, and we both know that would never happen. Suddenly Byleth is pulled into a hug and Dimitri buries his head into her neck. I swear, I will protect you. Regardless of what may happen between us, I will not let Lady Rhea take you. Byleth lets herself rest against him. It was such a simple declaration, yet it brought her more comfort than Byleth expected it would. The next few days go by in a blur for Byleth. Dimitri is still getting called away into meetings every day but has been putting his foot down more with his advisors and other lords. The two of them have also resumed their previous schedule of eating and sparring together. Which is probably for the best, he really needs to work if he wants to improve. Byleth hadn't expected Dimitri regaining his eye to throw him off so much, but it is what it is. The only difference is that he would occasionally invite other people to join them. He said it was to help get her used to being in his home and to let others adjust to her. Dimitri had a decent point. If she never tried to get used to the idea of being in his castle, she would always have a dim view of it. They dined with both Ingrid and Sylvain's fathers the other night. It had been awkward. They had both been relatively nice, but Lord Galatea had almost exclusively spoken with Dimitri and Margrave Gautier had been very interested in discovering whether she had a crest. Byleth has no idea how he or anyone really would react to finding out she has the crest of flames. Byleth, is the food not to your liking? Dimitri was looking at her in concern. Oh right, they were eating. The food is wonderful, I was simply thinking. They were eating lunch together, between a couple of his meetings. As soon as his plate was empty someone would be by to collect him. Before Dimitri could question her further, a servant approached them. Your Majesty, this letter was just delivered for you. The servant bowed and presented the missive. Dimitri took it and examined the seal. Thank you, you may go now. The servant bowed to Dimitri and began walking away, he even nodded his head in her direction before departing. Dimitri, meanwhile, scanned the contents of the letter, his face unreadable. Is everything okay? Could something have happened? Things are going well at the army's base camp. There is a long list of updates about various things, but everything and everyone appears to be doing well. I will have a fair amount of work to do when we return, but it's nothing out of the ordinary. Dimitri was silent as he continued reading, until a smile spread across his face. Dida will be joining us soon. He is no longer required at the camp, so he will be traveling here with more updates and then be part of our escort back. No wonder Dimitri looked happy. They would be seeing Dida soon. While I will miss getting to spend time alone with you like this, it will be good to have him with us. That's right, Dida will likely be joining them for meals and spars until they leave. Perhaps while I am in meetings, you and Dida could do things together. Byleth looks away. She's not sure if that's the best idea. I know I promised to try more, but I'm not certain this is the best way to go about it. Why is that? She looks back at Dimitri. Dida does not actually want to interact with me, he would only be doing so because you asked. It will feel too much like pity, and I don't want that. Byleth wants to try, but not like this. I'm sorry, I know I'm being difficult, but No, I understand. I would not want pity either. Dimitri looked thoughtfully at the letter. How about you go about your day as usual, however, if the opportunity arises you do not avoid Dida. You don't need to force conversation and I will not ask Dida to either. He looks melancholy for a moment. I dearly wish to see you two get along again, but if things are awkward or uncomfortable then you should leave. I'd prefer nothing come of it, than to have either of you feel negatively about interacting. That seemed like a reasonable plan. Okay. I won't avoid Dida, but I won't go out of my way either. If he approaches me, I will likewise not try to immediately leave. It won't be easy, but Byleth wanted to keep her promise. Dimitri beamed at her. Excellent. Dimitri was desperately trying not to dwell on what Byleth told him in their shared dream. He feared that otherwise he would do something drastic. That would not be good for either of them. Unfortunately, that meant he was forced to pay more attention to what Byleth instead told him about the intentions of the nobles. Now that he was more aware, Dimitri feels even more foolish to have not realized what his advisors and visiting lords were trying to accomplish. He hadn't been paying much attention before, but they were doing more than mentioning that they had a female relative around his age. My daughter would love to come with me next time. My granddaughter would adore the gardens. I hope you get to spend more time in Third Iad soon. Seeing you more often would be beneficial for many endeavors. It was subtle, no one had outright said they wanted him to meet their daughters, granddaughters, nieces, etc., but it wasn't hard to miss. At least Dida would get here soon. Between him and Byleth, Dimitri might get a bit more breathing room. Perhaps the three of them can do something together. Byleth was open to spending time with Dida if it wasn't awkward and Dida would at least be polite. Maybe if they spend time together, Dida will come to like Byleth on his own. Hopefully potentially regaining one lost friendship will bring Byleth some joy. However, she did bring up a good point earlier. Dida has not expressed any interest in her beyond recognizing Dimitri's own feelings. He would not enjoy someone he cared about only approaching him because someone else told them to. Byleth is right to not want a shadow over their interactions. Dimitri would not ask Dida, who would take it as an order, to spend time with Byleth. That would probably do more harm than good in the end. On the other hand, he could arrange things so that his beloved and Dida would have more opportunities to see each other. Dimitri just needed to be careful about it. Chapter 32, A Friend's Arrival. The sounds of weapons clashing rang throughout the training grounds. They were only using wooden training weapons, but Dimitri was still thoroughly enjoying himself. Sparring with Byleth was always a pleasure, he didn't even need to hold back. In the event that his crest did accidentally activate, it wouldn't faze Byleth at all. Between her own crest and battle prowess, his beloved could more than handle anything he threw at her. Their spar had attracted attention from onlookers, mostly knights, for a little while, but the novelty wore off soon enough. I apologize that you had to eat breakfast by yourself. Dimitri had wanted to eat with her, watching Byleth eat was always wonderful to behold, but he had gotten unexpectedly held up by an advisor and then some last-minute paperwork. Byleth struck his training lance so hard, he could feel it vibrating. I don't mind. Byleth struck again. I would prefer that you focus on the spar. Of course. If he doesn't focus, there is no way Dimitri could hope to win. I probably won't get to join you for lunch either, but I should be free in time for dinner. Dida should arrive later today as well. It would be nice to see him again, Dimitri had missed his friend dearly. Byleth's face remained passive, but her strikes were getting harder. She was probably annoyed at his continued lack of focus. I said it is fine, I do not mind eating alone. Dimitri knew that, but he would still prefer to join her. The spar ends with Byleth tripping him with a leg sweep. He winds up on his back with her training sword pointed at his throat and her heeled boot digging into his side. She is so beautiful from this position. I concede. Dimitri takes her offered hand and stand up. Would you like to join me in any of the upcoming meetings? He doubted she would, but Dimitri felt he should still make the offer. No thank you, I'd prefer to not have old men glare at me for who knows how many hours. Byleth stretched. I'll find something to keep me occupied, don't worry. It's not like I'm alone either. Those were good points. Dimitri is sure that the meetings would be much more enjoyable on his end, but Byleth would probably have a less positive experience. Alight, I will see you at dinner then. Bye. Byleth walked out of the training yard and disappeared around a corner. Dimitri waited until she was out of sight before leaving himself. I fail to see why the two of you enjoy sparring so much. I understand that you need to keep your skills up, but it seems to go beyond that. Sparring is fun. There's no real explanation beyond that. You are both truly strange. Byleth is reasonably certain Suthies wanted her to try more with Dimitri. They are rather limited in what they can currently do together. I suppose, though I do wonder how your current dynamic will change with the boy's retainer being present. Byleth wonders about that too. She's feeling a mix of emotions that she cannot identify. It is not the most pleasant of feelings. She will not run from it though. Byleth made a promise and intends to keep it. Nothing will ever improve or change if she doesn't even try to put the effort in. Byleth just wishes she could be more optimistic about things. When he returned to his office, Dimitri found a huge stack of paperwork waiting for him. It wasn't a surprising sight, but it was a disheartening one. He'd better not wait then. If Dimitri did, there would be no chance of meeting Byleth for dinner. As Dimitri worked through the forms, he couldn't help but wonder what Byleth and Suthies were doing. He has no idea what they get up to while he is busy. Sometimes they go to the library, but he isn't sure what they are reading. If they are reading at all. Is Byleth bored? There isn't much to do around here for her, so it is possible. One can only read and spar so much. At least his beloved seems to always enjoy their shared meals. Dmitri shakes his head in an effort to clear it. As important as Byleth is, he needs to focus. The paperwork is significant, and his next meeting is going to be about setting things up so they can invade Shambhala. He has to be careful with how he words things as he cannot explain exactly how he knows, but he wants to start preparations. Byleth thought it was a good idea and recommended that he just play up learning things while he was fighting the Agarthans. He did kill Thales after all, and there was everything with Cornelia. Dmitri is eager to get things started. The Agarthans have plagued Fodlan long enough, and the Nabateans deserve their retribution. It takes less time than Dmitri thought it would for Didu to arrive in Fhirdiad. As soon as word of his friend's arrival reached him, Dmitri rushed to greet him at the gates. Not the most dignified of responses, but Dmitri cannot bring himself to care. Didu bows as soon as he catches sight of him, which is expected, though Dmitri would have personally preferred a less formal greeting. It is good to see you, Your Majesty. Didu moved to the side as a servant walked his horse away. Has your time in Fhirdiad and Garagmach been well spent? Dmitri smiled. It has, my friend, thank you for asking. Dmitri leads them back into the castle. There have been many meetings, and I think some great progress has been made. How was the journey here? There were no issues during my travels. Once they appear to be alone, Didu casts him a thoughtful look. If I may, Your Majesty, how are things with Lady Byleth? The last we spoke on the matter, things were not going as well as you would have liked. There has been progress between us. Dmitri sighed. I am ashamed to admit I have missed some important things, but we have had several frank conversations about our relationship. One was held before we even left. Byleth might not have agreed to come with him at all if they hadn't finally started being completely open with each other. We agreed to work on things, and I feel optimistic, but it will not be easy. I am confident you will succeed, Your Majesty. That is nice of him to say. I appreciate your faith in me. Didu is always on his side, so it is unsurprising to hear. Dmitri is curious though, what does his friend make of all this? Didu, I have a question I'd like to ask you, but before you answer, please know that I would highly appreciate it if you would be completely honest. Dmitri wants to know what Didu thinks and would prefer his vassal not just say what he believes Dmitri wants to hear. Didu bows. Of course, Your Majesty. I would like to know what you think of Byleth. Dmitri keeps his eyes on his friend's face. You know what I would like to happen between her and me, but what do you think of Byleth on a personal level? Didu is silent, searching Dmitri's face for a moment. If he finds whatever he is looking for, Dmitri cannot say. I barely know Lady Byleth and therefore don't have much of an opinion on her. She is a skilled fighter and must have good qualities for you to hold affection for her, but I cannot say anything beyond that. Didu shrugs. I've never felt the need to really get to know her. Dmitri can understand more acutely now why Byleth kept going off on her own. Didu was not being rude or harsh, but to hear that someone you cared for was so apathetic towards you would not be good for anyone. If you would like, Your Majesty, I could make an effort to get to know Lady Byleth better. Dmitri shakes his head. It is all right, my friend. I would prefer you only approach Byleth because you want to, not because you feel it is something I want. The remaining meetings of the day are less tedious with Didu accompanying him, but Dmitri eventually encourages his vassal to spend some time relaxing. You spent a long time traveling here, you should do something restful. If he doesn't leave soon, it might be too late. The sun will not be up forever, and I know you want to see to your garden. There is still a small plot reserved strictly for Didu. The gardeners have been watering the plants in his absence, so they are still thriving, but the plot still belongs to his friend. Based on Byleth's usual daily patterns, she should pass through the gardens while Didu is there if he leaves soon. Dmitri will not do anything further, but he wants to at least give them an opportunity to converse away from prying eyes. They will likely share meals together, but with everyone else around, both are liable to keep conversations to a minimum. Didu looks conflicted and hesitant. Are you sure, Your Majesty? Yes, Dmitri claps a hand on Didu's shoulder. We can meet up at dinner. I look forward to hearing about how your plants are faring. Byleth has finished with her sword practice for the day and is headed to the library. Her right arm is a little sore, but it is nothing a little rest won't help with. She probably overworked it a bit. I am eager to finish our current book. It has been enlightening to see all the different inaccuracies that fill Fodlan's history books. It had been surprising to see how all the small falsehoods added up. We need to see how deeply it all runs. Between that and our research into crests we should get a clearer picture of everything. They've almost exhausted all the books the castle library has on their current interests, so maybe they should try visiting the School of Sorcery to get more information. They need to know more about their connection and hopefully get an inkling of how much history was altered. Byleth likely has the Crest of Flames because of their relationship, but they don't know how Suthies wound up in Byleth. If they are correct about things, Suthies' heart was taken out of Citrai and put in Byleth. So, why did Suthies only wake up when Byleth almost died? Why did she never wake for Citrai, who was sickly and likely in danger at points throughout her own life? Was there anything they didn't yet know about their connection? We know how crests originally worked, but I find it unlikely that Rhea slipped some of my blood to baby you. I doubt even my blood would be around after so long. It must be something else. The easy answer would be that my heart is the source of it all, but the easy answer is never the correct one with us. Suthies shook her head. My crest stone was in your mother for decades, yet I have absolutely no memory of her, and as far as we know she did not have the Crest of Flames. The fact that neither of them knew how they became connected with certainty weighed on them both. Byleth didn't like that there was yet another thing she didn't know about herself. It felt like the list was never ending. Byleth halts in a doorway. The quickest route to the library from the training grounds requires her to walk through the gardens. Which means going outside. In the cold. Cease your complaining. We want to be quick, so deal with it. You will only have to be outside for a few minutes at most. Suthies does have a point. It is just a short walk through the gardens. Still, when she asked Dimitri about quick routes to take, Byleth wishes he could have recommended a warmer path to traverse. It was better than having to deal with gossiping servants though. She just had to walk quickly. If it's that much of a bother, you could always wear one of the outfits the maids try leaving for you. That would mean wearing a dress, which would restrict her movements, not exactly optimal for training. Besides, the gowns were much too fine for her to be comfortable with wearing them. You make some good points, I suppose. Now be quick about it, I do not relish being cold either. Byleth hurriedly walked the path through the gardens, and just as she reached the exit, she spotted Dido working amongst some plants. It is so tempting to keep going. Not only is she already freezing, but it is still her first instinct to avoid her former students. It has long been better to retreat than feel the inevitable pain. However, she did promise to try more, so Byleth should make an effort to interact with Dido. He has always been polite with her, so even if the usual happens it won't be as bad as it has been with the others. Hello, how are your plants doing? Byleth cannot imagine it is easy to maintain them in these temperatures. Dido looks up but doesn't appear to have any special reaction to the sight of her. That plants are doing well, thank you. Maybe she should just go. Neither of them are very talkative and things are getting awkward. Have you been enjoying your time in Fhirdiad? His Majesty was very excited to bring you with him. Dido was looking at her curiously. He probably at the very least suspects something is going on between her and Dimitri. With how unsubtle Dimitri is, Byleth wouldn't be surprised if Dido had figured out his king was in love with a mercenary. He didn't seem to be disapproving, but he emoted about as much as she does, so that doesn't mean much. I probably like it about as much as you do. She's seen the looks he gets at the army encampments. It's likely worse here. After all this time and word getting out about the truth, the citizens of Faerghus still have such prejudice against those from Duscur. It was sad really. At least it hasn't escalated farther. I see. If you will excuse me, it is very cold out here and I'd like to go warm up. Byleth begins to walk away, while rubbing her hands together for warmth. She really cannot stay outside. Good luck with your plants, I hope they continue to grow strong. Byleth picks up her pace and is soon inside again. It is blessedly warm. That was a rather good attempt, considering how unverbose the both of you are. Suthies laughed. Hurry along now, I wish for us to get back to work. It is nice knowing Suthies has her back, Byleth should probably express that more. Ha. Maybe not, the goddess does not need any ego boosting. Rude. All jokes aside, Byleth had no idea what she was doing while talking with Dedue. She has always had trouble making friends, children used to run from her because she was so strange. Byleth just doesn't know how to interact with people her age outside of a professional setting. While I can understand where you are coming from, you'll never learn if you don't try, Suthies said thoughtfully. Not the easiest task, I am aware. Suthies makes a good point. Byleth cannot hope to develop a skill if she never trains for it. The three of them have dinner together that night. Dimitri has been doing most of the talking, as neither of his dining companions are very talkative. That is fine though, they are both still contributing and there haven't been any awkward silences yet. Dedue informed them that his garden was prospering, while Byleth spent half the day at the training grounds before going to the library. The two of them had apparently met in the gardens when Byleth was walking to the library. It wasn't a long conversation, but Dimitri was happy all the same. They had to start somewhere. Dedue, Byleth, would you be willing to spar in the morning? My meetings are winding down and I would like to get in more exercise. Dimitri was also hoping they could all do something together. I think we would all benefit from the experience. Dedue nodded in agreement. I have no objections, Your Majesty. I usually go to the training grounds in the morning anyway. Byleth's face is difficult to read, as usual, but at least she is keeping her promise. I'm still a little uneasy about everything. Byleth was preparing to go to bed. She had to be up a little earlier than usual after all. Though I am glad that Dimitri hasn't been pushy about me interacting with Dedue. She appreciates that he is setting up potential situations for them to talk and nothing more. That is good of him. I was honestly expecting him to be pushier. Suthies chuckles. He's always been a bit single-minded, especially when it comes to you. I still do not care much for Fhirdiad, at least as a place to live, but people are not whispering behind my back anymore. So, there's that improvement. That does seem to be the case. I just hope the boy doesn't become complacent. He needs to stay alert or the vipers in his court will be our undoing. That seems a little extreme. All royal courts have vipers. In the boy's father's it was Rufus, Cornelia, and possibly his second wife. It's just a matter of how one deals with them. If someone figures out what the two of you are doing and how heavily the king relies on you, you will have to deal with more than just rumors and whispers. Chapter 33, Research and Conclusions. The sound of clashing wood echoes throughout the training grounds. Dimitri would have preferred that they used real weapons, but they couldn't risk serious injury right now. He's honestly not sure who is going to win. In a one-on-one match Dimitri is reasonably certain that Byleth could defeat both himself and Dedue, but with all three of them fighting things are a little more complicated. Dimitri is thoroughly enjoying himself either way. He loves sparring and now he gets to do it with two of his favorite people. Byleth blocks his blow and forces Dedue back, before lowering her wooden practice sword. We should have some water before continuing. We do not need to take a break. I am more than fine with continuing. Dimitri is worried that if they stop for too long someone will come rushing in with one problem or another that needs his attention. I think Lady Byleth is correct, said Dedue. We have been sparring for over an hour, we need to make sure to take proper care of ourselves if we want to continue for a substantial amount of time. While that does make sense. Surely, we can at least finish the current match before we take a break. Dimitri was having a good time, it seems a shame to not be able to declare a clear winner. Byleth sighs before walking towards him and then knocks him to the ground, before turning to Dedue. Do you want to call this a draw? That seems like an adequate decision. Byleth offers him a hand. There, now the match is over, let's get some water. Dimitri takes her hand. As he stands up the world wobbles a bit. Maybe Dimitri does need water. Well played Byleth, Dimitri chuckles. I concede defeat. They all move to a nearby bench and spend the next few minutes in silence. Dimitri's head feels better as well, though it wasn't terrible to begin with. If there is no issue, I have been considering visiting the school or sorcery again. Byleth was looking at her cup of water. During my last visit I only silently followed you around, and there is something I'd like to take care of there. Could this mean she might be interested in teaching again if things work out between them? Dimitri remembers that she didn't seem too keen on the idea when he first suggested it, but perhaps Byleth has reconsidered. I could take you. I'm sure I could clear my schedule a bit. Dimitri could always make up some excuse that he needed to go. That's fine, I don't want to cause you any trouble. Byleth shrugged. I just want to look up something in the library. Dimitri shook his head. It wouldn't be any trouble at all. He would love to go anywhere with Byleth. If you're sure. Dimitri felt a smile spread across his face. I am. He then turned to Didu. Would you be opposed to joining us? You are welcome to remain here if you would prefer. I have no objections to going. Perhaps this was a good chance for all of them to spend time together. After Dimitri's latest meeting about agricultural issues plaguing some areas in the southern part of Faerghus, he managed to excuse himself for the rest of the day. He'd proposed going to the School of Sorcery to see if a magical solution could be found, and no one was opposed to the idea. Byleth was rather impressed with his quick thinking. Is there anything you need help finding? Asked Dimitri. I won't pretend to be overly familiar with all the School of Sorcery has to offer, but I've been here often enough to know the layout of things. Byleth shook her head. I just want to spend some time in the library. I can remember where it is from our last visit. Honestly, I can appreciate the boy's desire to help, but it will be difficult to concentrate on the books if he keeps hovering like this. That was a good point. Why don't you go speak with one of the mages about your agricultural issue, then meet me in the library when you're done? It seemed like a reasonable compromise to Byleth. She and Suthies needed to get to their research, and Dimitri had his own responsibilities to contend with. He could easily meet up with her later. I assure you, I will not leave the library, so I should be easy to locate. Dimitri did not look convinced. Are you sure? I do not wish to distract you from your reading, but I will be fine, and you don't want to be caught in a lie. Byleth knows they both agreed to try more, but separating for a little while only made sense. All right, Dimitri said with a slight bow. Didu and I will head off for a bit, then meet you in the library. Byleth nodded. I wish you luck with your research, Lady Byleth. Didu gave his own bow. She would still prefer he not call her that, but there really wasn't any point in saying so again. Thank you. Byleth watched them walk away before heading to her own destination. Byleth and Suthies spend the next couple of hours looking through what books about crests the Fhirdiad School of Sorcery has in stock. It is rather frustrating that we haven't found anything that could lead us to our answers. Just what is the source of our connection, and what could have been the original intent? Suthies shook her head. I highly doubt whoever is responsible simply wanted me to float around in your head, observing the world through your eyes. While they didn't know for a fact, they were both aware of who must have started all this and their dark theory of her intent. Given that Rhea was there for my birth, she probably had something to do with it. It would explain a few other things, like the Archbishop's interest in her. Byleth had always found it unnerving. If Rhea did put the crest stone of flames into you as a newborn, what was the reason? Was it to simply save your life if you were born without a heartbeat, or was there something else? That was an excellent question. On top of that, why was Rhea so adamant that you sit on the throne? If Rhea is Siros, then she would know I would not grant any revelations. I have never done such a thing. We both know the scriptures stating I granted a revelation to Siros were a fabrication. Byleth had long wondered the same thing. She didn't question it much at the time, because losing Suthies so soon after her father had not left her in the best headspace. She spent much of that time in her life simply going through the motions. I find the implications of it all unsettling. This is part of the reason I don't want to reach out to see if Rhea really is Siros. I am afraid of what the answers could be. Of how far my daughter may have fallen. Part of the reason we are doing all this is to hopefully find answers that are not terrifying. Byleth is worried too. Then there's everything that happened with Maurice. Yes, I could not bear it if something like that happened to the boy or any of the other children. Byleth isn't sure how likely that is, since beside that incident with Miklon before everything happened, there's never been any record of someone transforming because of their crest or hero's relic. They've looked through enough books that they should have seen something about it. But what if it wasn't recorded? Rhea forbade you from saying anything about what happened that night in the tower. What if that wasn't the first cover-up of its kind? That wasn't impossible given all they know. Could something like that happen to Dimitri or any of the other descendants of the 10 elites? I don't know, that is why we are doing research. There is too much we don't know. That seems to be an unfortunate pattern in Byleth's life. After he finished consulting some of the professors, Dimitri headed towards the library with Didu at his side. The meetings took longer than expected and he feels bad for leaving Byleth alone for so long. Though he supposes with Suthies there, his beloved isn't truly alone. If I may be so bold, Your Majesty, how are things going with Lady Byleth? Didu was careful to keep his voice down. The last we spoke of the topic you were optimistic. Has there been any progress? I remain optimistic, but I am well aware that things are not as good as they could be. Dimitri knows some of it is simply out of their hands. I feel I am asking a lot from Byleth as our lifestyles are not exactly compatible. I know a lot of the things I find normal, make her uncomfortable. I have lived a version of her lifestyle, from traveling with the army along with other things. I can do it, but I'm not sure how long I would last. Among other things, it would require him to abandon his duties and it might also remind him too much for those 5 dark years. I suspect that is why Byleth has never asked it of me. Dimitri knows the simplest solution would be for them to just run away with each other, but Byleth has never even suggested such an idea. He did propose that they do so after he'd gotten things situated in Faerghus, but even Dimitri is aware that such a task could take decades. A thoughtful look crosses Didu's face. One would not expect someone nicknamed the Ashen Demon to be such a considerate woman. Dimitri nods in agreement. She is a wonderful, caring person. It's just that most people never bother to see farther than her blank face. Byleth can feel emotions very strongly, she just can't display them with ease. His beloved has gotten much better at facial expressions but is still less inclined to make them than most. He can still keenly remember the early days where he believed she really was emotionless and felt nothing when she killed. It was amazing how far they both had come. A frown overtakes his face. Though I fear that even if Byleth and I should get together, we will never have a typical marriage. He's not sure if they can have a legal marriage anytime in the near future, if they will ever have children, or even if they can have a public relationship as they are now. Safer as it may be, it does make Dimitri sad to think that his close friends might never know that he managed to find someone like Byleth. That might not be a bad thing, Your Majesty, Didu interjected. As long as you both are happy, does it matter if your relationship is typical or not? Dimitri hadn't considered that. Thank you for your insight and support, my friend. It is gratifying to know someone has such faith in him. It is also nice to have someone to share things about Byleth with. Did you find what you were looking for? Dimitri asked as they traveled back to the castle in his carriage. Byleth shrugged and looked out the window. I'm not sure. All the books just confirmed things I already knew. Oh, you seemed so focused on your book when we got to the library, it didn't seem right to interrupt you. That would explain why Byleth looked up after she had finished reading her last book to see Dimitri and Didu silently going through their own books. If I may, what were you attempting to research? Inquired Didu. There are some inconsistencies with crests and their history. I'm trying to figure out things related to that. Everything was buried very well, so it was proving to be a challenge. Even Suthies was having difficulties as her memory was far from complete. Still, if looking through books could lead to giving Suthies more peace of mind, Byleth would do it without complaint. It did not take them long to reach their destination and Dimitri rushed to help her out of the carriage. I am capable of exiting a carriage on my own. Byleth understands the meaning of the gesture but has long thought such things to be ridiculous. If she was wearing one of those hard-to-move-in dresses that noblewomen seemed to like, Byleth would understand, but she was wearing her usual clothes. Dimitri smiled at her. I know, but I would also like to be polite. You deserve nothing less. Byleth sighed but accepted his hand. This really wasn't worth arguing over. Byleth, it isn't quite time for dinner yet, but I was hoping that we could. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Before Dmitri could finish, a servant was running towards them. He was wearing a distinctive uniform, but Byleth could not recall what it indicated. "We've been here how long, and you have not bothered to pay attention to that?" Byleth is reasonably certain Suthies hasn't cared enough to memorize what servants are wearing what uniforms either. Suthies huffed. "I am not the one interacting with them." A reasonable point, but Byleth honestly hasn't cared enough to pay attention. They don't have much respect for her, so she doesn't feel the need to show them more than common courtesy. Dmitri may have stopped the whispering and rumors, but she can still see how they look at her out of the corner of her eyes. Not that she can fully blame them. Their king is suspiciously attentive to a seemingly random mercenary. They have no reason to show her any trust or respect. The maids all seem rather excited whenever the boy sends you a message. They probably just like the gossip. Byleth, Dmitri's voice broke her out of her musings. "Apologies, but I am needed for another meeting." He looked a little annoyed by that. "I will ensure to meet you for dinner though." "That's fine, I expected something to come up when we returned." It was impressive enough that Dmitri managed to escape for an afternoon. "I will see you at dinner then." With nothing else to do for the day, Byleth decided to wait in her room until it was time for dinner. She had no desire to wander around aimlessly, and it would give her and Suthies some space to collect their thoughts. "I think it is time we share some of our theories with the boy. He already knows a lot about what is going on, and as king of the Holy Kingdom, he has some difficult decisions to make regarding the church and its relationship with Faerghus. To make an informed decision, he needs all the information he can get. While that seems like the right course of action, you do realize that means telling him about Siros, yes?" Byleth isn't sure about telling him everything. Dmitri is very protective, and that could easily get them in trouble. He was not happy when I told him of our suspicions on her intentions for me. I understand what you are saying, and I am worried too. I just think this isn't something we should hide," said Suthies. "The boy needs to know the character of the allies he keeps, and if something should happen and you are discovered, I think it best that someone other than your father takes the situation seriously." Dmitri is having one of his usual nightmares about Duskar when he finds himself before the throne again. It is a relief to not relive his past and to see Suthies and Byleth, both of whom are looking at him intently. "Hello, if you feel up to it, Suthies and I would like to share some of our research with you." Byleth looks tired, but her eyes do not waver from his. "We felt it best to wait until there would be no risk of someone overhearing." Suthies smiles. "It also allows me to better participate." Byleth relaying my words is all well and good, but given the nature of our investigation, this is better. "That does make sense. What exactly have the two of you been researching?" Byleth had explained earlier that she was looking into discrepancies of history and crests, but that couldn't be all it was. Privacy wouldn't be so important otherwise. "We've already discussed how crests originally came to the 10 elites, so we shall not linger there, but that is not where it ends," Suthies began. "Over time there have been many attempts to transfer crests and to guarantee unborn children will have them. We think crests are dying out," Byleth explained. "With every generation, less and less children are born with them." That was true, many were panicking about it. That might explain why minor crests, like mine, are becoming more common. If Dmitri was remembering correctly, the last Bladdid with a major crest was his great-grandfather, and it was sporadic before then. "That is another thing," Suthies said thoughtfully, "there were no major or minor crests when the Nabateans were more plentiful. There were just crests." "Oh. Our guess is that eventually there won't be people with major crests anymore, and after that crests themselves will cease manifesting." Byleth shrugged. "We don't know when that will happen, but it is a likely outcome. We've also been able to infer things based on our combined knowledge. Nothing that really affects us right now, but it was still interesting." That caught Dmitri's attention. "What were you able to conclude from your reading?" "We are reasonably certain that when Faerghus originally split from the Adrestia, they had help from the Agarthans." "What?" Dmitri practically yelled. "Are you certain? How could they have? Why would they?" "Suthies and I don't think Lug was aware of their assistance, if that makes you feel any better," Byleth said soothingly. "As far as we can tell, Pan might have been an Agarthan or had some connection with them. According to the history books, Pan supplied Lug's army with unique weapons. The weapons sound like what the Agarthans have been using. Suthies nodded. That is the how. As for the why, is it not obvious? The Agarthans likely wanted to destabilize those who lived on the surface. The best way to do that is to get the people above ground to thin their own numbers, rather like they are doing now. Byleth and Suthies looked at each other for a moment, before returning their gazes to him. We've also been trying to understand the source of our connection. Byleth crossed her arms. We don't know anything for certain, but we do have some guesses. Suthies leaned into one of the armrests of her throne. I believe you were already made aware of this, but our assumption at the moment is that your archbishop took the crest stone that was originally in the sword of the Creator, my heart, and put it inside Byleth. Dimitri nodded. That would explain why can live without a heartbeat and why the sword works despite the lack of a crest stone. To think that the two of them may literally share a heart. Though I do wonder how Lady Rhea knew to do such a thing. I do have a theory about that. Suthies looks uncomfortable, before steeling herself. I suspect that Rhea is actually Siros. We already know Nabateans live very long lives, there is no reason to think Siros isn't still alive, and they look uncannily alike. Dimitri can see it, she just changes her name every so often and continues to run the religion she started. It would certainly explain why change was so slow. Most people are hesitant to alter the way they do things. I know we haven't discussed this since I last brought it up and you have been doing a fantastic job of not dwelling on it, but there's also the theory we have regarding Rhea's plans for me. Byleth looked away for a moment. How we think she might have planned to use me as what amounts to a human sacrifice. Dimitri sees red. He had been doing his best to not think about that. To not linger on his anger and horror at the possible intended fate of his beloved. Here though, he doesn't need to worry about being heard or seen. He can finally let himself think about it without fretting over the consequences. How dare she? How dare the Archbishop try to replace an innocent person, an ally at that, in such a way? That fact that the Archbishop tried to do it to his beloved just makes things worse. How could Suthies' daughter, someone who should know the goddess, think she could be so cruel as to take the life of anyone to sustain herself? Suthies was kind, he cannot imagine her ever showing even an indication she would want such a horrific thing. Dimitri begins to pace. We have to do something, I'm not sure what, to Lady Rhea if that is true. If she comes near Byleth ever again, Archbishop or not, Dimitri might strangle her. Using a weapon would be too quick. Calm yourself. Suthies is standing before him, Dimitri hadn't even noticed her moving. I am as upset as you are, but if me taking Byleth's body for myself was the plan, it will not happen. I will never permanently do that. The goddess looks truly distraught. I will only ever do it temporarily and with Byleth's permission. Suthies looks away in discomfort. And should Rhea truly be Siros, I will make her understand how furious I am with her actions. Even if I didn't love Byleth, I could never replace another's life with my own. She turns back to him. Now we all need to keep our heads as we tread forward. Byleth had said the same thing when she originally told him. It was a comfort to hear it again, but it didn't stop him from worrying. Dimitri knew they needed to be wary of the church, but when all this started, he hadn't expected they would need to be so distrustful of his kingdom's oldest ally. He'd been avoiding considering the implications, but that couldn't last forever. I don't think Seath or Flane knew about anything, but by now they might. Byleth's voice, as always, cuts through his darker thoughts. We will need to find a way to weaken Faerghus's ties with the church. Dimitri will not allow any threat towards Byleth remain. He will not stand for it. Severing them completely would be disastrous though, so as Suthies said, plans will need to be carefully made. Chapter 34, A Set Course. Byleth woke with a start. She had honestly expected a much louder reaction from Dimitri. He had certainly been upset, but it was not as explosive as she anticipated. He had been furious when Shay/Arvel/Epimenides tried to kill her and when she first told him about the Agarthans. Strange as it may sound, this quieter reaction worried her more than a volatile one would have. Though he had been sitting on the knowledge for a little while. I must agree. The boy has always been protective and with the progress you've been making together he likely has more hope than before. Based on his past behavior, I was expecting something different as well. At least they will be leaving Thur-Dyad soon. It should do them all some good to get back to the camp. Byleth would get to see her father again, and perhaps active combat would help Dimitri. He always had a healthier mindset when he got to fight. For now, Byleth will just have to keep an eye on Dimitri. If he lets slip his newfound animosity with the church, it will only cause them trouble. And they really don't need more of that. As soon as he awoke, Dimitri immediately got to work. They had known for a while that Ria was unusually interested in Byleth. His father had become so afraid he'd run off with his newborn, and Dimitri himself has experienced her fixation when he visited Gareg Mach. It was very lucky that the visit had taken place before he'd learned everything, or things probably would have turned out terribly. For now, he needed to find some kind of precedent for loosening Faerghus's ties with the church. Dimitri will not allow any threats to Byleth to have a strong presence near him, but at the same time the church itself was important to his very rule. Not only that, but as he told Claude, the common people heavily relied on the Church of Syros for things like education and healing. He wants to improve the lives of his people, and simply banishing the church from the kingdom would cause them many hardships. All he could think of doing at the moment is going through historical records of past kings and their reigns. Hopefully one or two ruled during a time where the Church of Syros had a diminished presence. He just needs something to work with. Dimitri wants Byleth to at least feel safe while in his lands. She deserves more than to have to constantly look over her shoulder in fear of the Archbishop's plans. He is broken out of his thoughts when there is a knock at his door. "Come in." Didu enters and bows before speaking. "Your Majesty, I am sorry to interrupt, but you've missed our morning spar with Lady Byleth." Had he really been looking through the books and records for that long? It had been rather early in the day when Dimitri had a servant bring them to his room. Surely it was not so late he's missed out on spending time with Byleth and Didu. A quick look out his window proved him wrong. The sun was now much higher in the sky. "Lady Byleth and I spared for a little while, before we both took our leave," Didu continued. "I do not wish to pull you away from your current work, but if you do not leave shortly, you will be late for your first meeting of the day. That would not be good." They would be leaving soon and did not need the disruption of a delay because an additional meeting was called due to his negligence. "Of course, I will just clean up my mess and then we can be on our way." Dimitri put the various books and papers into a neat pile, before exiting his room. "I am sorry to have missed the spar. Did you at least have a good time?" Didu nodded. "Lady Byleth is a skilled combatant and has a surprising amount of knowledge about axes. She recommended a few forms to me." Didu pauses and looks over at him. "She seemed worried but not surprised when you did not join us. I had wanted to go find you, but she seemed certain you needed some time to yourself. That is a relief." Dimitri is sure that if anyone has come across him while he was frantically looking through everything and ranting under his breath, they would think him mad. He probably was at least a little mad, but only Byleth and Suthies needed to know about the true depths of his depravity. Dimitri hadn't entered the darkness like he once had, but that did not mean it would never happen again. It would be fine though. If everything worked out, they would be leaving Thur-Dyad within the week and returning to his army's base camp. Once that happened, he and Byleth would have more freedom of movement. Dimitri began to walk down the hallway. "Let us be on our way then." With his new knowledge and understanding, Dimitri might also be able to do something about Byleth's situation with his friends. There were many things he needed to work on and figure out. Getting away from Thur-Dyad and all the comforts it provides him, might even give him a better perspective on Byleth's situation. She has never viewed his home the way he has, and likely never will. If they are ever going to seriously consider resuming their romantic relationship, they need to be in agreement on many things, including where and how they should live. Byleth did not particularly enjoy being in his capital. If that did not change, living in his ancestral home together would never truly work. The days went by quickly and they were on the road again. As they travel back to camp, Dimitri and Byleth discussed things when they are able, which was not as often as he would like. As king, Dimitri was expected to spend most of the journey leading the way, and outside of his affections there was no reason for a mercenary to ride beside him. Byleth hadn't seemed bothered and spent most of her time riding close to the supply carts. It wasn't the worst outcome, as it gave Dmitri time to consider everything and come up with ideas. One thing that had been on his mind since they departed was how Byleth had questioned him about what sacrifices he would have to make to see them together again. She could only see things she would have to give up and had wanted to know what he would need to sacrifice if he got what he wanted. Byleth's costs were clear enough. Her lifestyle would be done away with, she would be surrounded by people who did not care for her, and she did not have the background or training to know how to be a queen. To put it simply, she would be isolated and alone, living a life she did not particularly care for or even knew how to survive in. She would of course have him, but Dmitri knew full well one needed more than that. He had so many people he relied upon, his friends, Rodrigue, and Byleth herself to name a few. It would be the height of hubris to assume that his company and his alone would be enough to bring her happiness. As king he would be busy much of the time anyway. There will be days where they would barely have time to interact. Byleth and Dida were spending time together, but they were not friends. Not yet, and he would have to accept that they might never be. It was too early to tell. Sotheis is also a factor, but his beloved deserved to have more than two people with her who legitimately cared for her. Geralt might stick around, but he wouldn't be any more suited to this lifestyle than his daughter. Byleth would probably insist that her father remain a mercenary, a profession he enjoyed. In contrast, what would Dmitri have to give up? Yes, his court would be furious if he married a low-born mercenary, and many noble families would take it as an insult, but he honestly didn't care about that. Many of them were already upset with the reforms he was currently pushing through. There probably wouldn't be much of a noticeable difference. On the other hand, it could potentially push one family or another into rebellion. Bladud kings had taken wives from the common folk in the past, but it had not happened for generations. His last relative to do so had been his great-grandfather's brother. Despite that, with tensions being as high as they were, it might not take much to push someone to more extreme reactions. Even that could be mitigated though, if his beloved and possibly her father earned enough renown on the battlefield while in his service. The soldiers already looked at both of them in awe, so they were probably already on their way to that. Both of them would have to deal with the consequences of their actions, but it does feel as though Byleth would be giving up more. The very way she would have to live would not bring her joy. Dmitri knows he can make her happy, but would it last, or would it only be brief moments of joy? Where could they live that would allow them to both be together and have happiness? No matter how he thought about it, Dmitri could not yet see a way for Ferdiad to be the answer. Not that that would make things any clearer. He was still king and could never be happy if he abandoned his duties. There is so much that needs to be taken into account. It is no wonder Byleth did not think he was truly comprehending her points before. Dmitri hadn't truly put much thought into any of this. As they journeyed to their destination, Dmitri had a lot of time to think. During that time, he has come up with the only solution he can think of that ends with him and Byleth together. He hasn't shared it yet though, because while it could ultimately work, it will take years and they will not be together for most of it. Dmitri knows how unsuited Byleth is for the only life he can offer and sees how it could only strain their relationship further. Any happiness they could find would not last. The idea is that they could find a way to extend his life and separate while he takes care of things in the kingdom. It's not a perfect plan, as Dmitri really does not care for the separation part. It also will not help with Byleth's concerns about their time apart, making them unsuitable as a couple. Perhaps when he shares his idea, Byleth will have thoughts on how to combat the issues. If she thinks it's a good plan, then they just need to figure out if they are still in love. Dmitri believes he loves Byleth, but she had a point when she conveyed her worries about them clinging to the past. He's not sure how to get around that. At the end of the day, he just wants them to choose something that neither of them will come to regret. Some hardship was preferable to misery. By the time Byleth had gotten her tent set up for the night, Sotheis had already fallen asleep. Dinner had been a quiet affair, with her eating with some of the knights. Dmitri and Dida were off somewhere else. Dmitri had tried to approach her, but other people kept getting in his way. She is not bothered that he eventually gave up. Drawing attention to themselves would not be a good thing, and she appreciates that he attempted to eat with her either way. Byleth just wants to sleep now. They had been traveling all day and will do so again for the next few days. She will need her rest, especially if she is expected to remain alert as they rode along. She had just settled into her bedroll when she heard footsteps. Her tent was not terribly near any of the others, so no one should have a reason to wander nearby. Byleth unsheathed the dagger from her belt and waited to see if whoever was outside would come closer. When a shadow passed over her, Byleth tensed. Byleth, are you awake? Oh, it was only Dimitri. What was Dimitri doing here? Byleth hastily went to open her tent and pulled Dimitri inside. What are you doing here? What if you were seen? I made sure no one but Dida saw me leave my tent, Dimitri chuckled. There is something that I've been considering that I would like to run by you, but we haven't had so much as a moment together for days. You are not sleeping in here with me. When they were traveling to Shambhala, Dimitri took every chance he could to sleep next to her. That was fine, for all his ulterior motives it was good for protection and warmth. Neither are required now. If that is what you are after, you can leave right now. A blush spread across his face. That's not it at all. I am well aware of the consequences if we are caught doing such a thing. Dimitri shook his head, and when she moved to the side, he moved further into the tent. He then adjusted himself on the ground so they could both sit more easily. The tent was on the small side, so their legs were pressed against each other, but at least it was more comfortable. I have been considering possible courses of action, and I think I might have a solution to at least some of our problems. Dimitri smiled sadly at her. It is by no means perfect or a guaranteed success, in fact I do not even like the idea. Still, it is the only way I can see even a chance for us to end up together. At least this time, he's sharing his idea instead of enacting it on his own without a thought to its potential negative impacts. All right, tell me what you've come up with. It's not like Byleth has any ideas. Admittedly, she and Suthies had been distracted by their research. It's not like they had a lot of chances to look through the libraries of the School of Sorcery or Dimitri's castle. Byleth can understand why Dimitri dislikes his idea, but it does have merit. If they continue to get along and she lengthens his lifespan, what's a decade or two compared to what they potentially have? They can just find a way to regularly be in contact with each other. Dimitri was correct, it was not perfect, but it could work. They just both have to put the effort in. Easier said than done considering their history, but that would have been the case with any plan. There are numerous issues, but one that could make this idea unusable is that we never figured out a way to lengthen my lifespan, said Dimitri. We know it's possible, but not how to go about it. If Byleth remembers correctly, Suthies did once bring up a ceremony that was supposed to help them with their different lifespans. Though she cannot recall if Suthies described what the ceremony involved in detail. A while ago Suthies mentioned a ceremony that might be able to help us. They agreed to work together. Byleth should share everything she can. Dimitri's eye immediately lit up. We should find a way to preform it right away. He grabbed her hands. It would take away at least one of our worries. I do not think that is a good idea. There he was, getting ahead of himself again. We should be absolutely sure this is what we will both want. Not just now, but in centuries. She's already unsure if she still loves Dimitri, and even if she does, they could both still eventually decide they are incompatible and or fall out of love later. She will not make Dimitri live as long as her, just to condemn him to centuries of loneliness. I think it would also be a good idea to let you age a bit more. We have to be subtle, and if it is more difficult to tell exactly how old you are, it will make it easier for us to go places. That does make sense. At least Dimitri looks sheepish. Apologies for charging forward without a thought again. You are correct that we still must work on things together, and that we should try to make things easier for ourselves going forward. At least he was seeing sense. That's not the only issue. I do not know how to perform the ceremony or what it entails, and while I could ask Suthies for more details, for it to all work you would need to have a major crest. Dimitri's eyes widened. So, the fact I have a minor crest could prevent us from doing it at all. At her nod, he looked disheartened. Given your legacy we might be able to figure something out, but for now, I think it would be best to drop this particular subject. Now that that is settled, they should probably wrap things up so Dimitri could go back to his own tent, and they can both get some sleep. What do you think of this? We could wait until the Millennium Festival. It feels right to wait for the night they technically reunited after she slept for 5 years. That will give us years to figure out what we want and time for you to grow a bit more. I do not care for the thought of waiting so long to take steps to ensure our future together, but that does seem like the most prudent path to take. Dmitri grips her hands a little more tightly. But you must promise to try and let things work for us. I know that you have been endeavoring to do so lately. I am simply asking that you continue on that path. I wish to dispel your worries, so you cannot avoid letting me know you as you are now. That is more than fair. Dmitri is finally taking her concerns seriously, and he even brought her the beginning of their new plan, instead of trying to do all the planning by himself. I can agree to that. He was trying, and Byleth could do no less. Once the war is over and I leave with my father and the others, we can continue to share dreams and perhaps write letters. The latter will not be the most reliable method of communication given how often she will be moving, but it was better than nothing. Dmitri beamed at her. That sounds like a wonderful idea. Now please leave. Before he could protest, Byleth continued. We both need our rest, we have a long day of traveling ahead of us. Dmitri nodded in agreement, though he still looked disappointed. Of course. He moved towards her tent's entrance but looked back at her before he departed. Good night, my beloved. Good night, Dmitri. Chapter 35, Uneasy Meals. They should be reaching the encampment soon, and Dmitri is feeling a mix of emotions. Relief to finally be back, happiness that he and his beloved are finally moving forward together, and trepidation about how Byleth might react to being around the others again, to name a few. Perhaps he should focus some of his energy on trying to remedy the latter, while everyone was in the same place. Dmitri turned to Didu, who was riding beside him. Didu, I have a slight favor to ask. Hopefully this will be something his friend will want to do on his own. I will do whatever you command, your majesty. Dmitri sighed. I know that you and Byleth were spending more time together before we left Fhirdiad. The two shared a spar most mornings, and Dmitri was always ecstatic when he was able to join them. I am hoping to encourage the others to similarly get along with her. All I ask is that if they bring up the matter that you, how to put this? As I have developed an amicable relationship with Lady Byleth, you would like me to reassure them of the idea. Yes, exactly. Thank the goddess that Didu caught on to what he was trying to say. Didu nodded. I will do as you ask. Looking back, it is rather obvious how much everyone was avoiding her. Lady Byleth had been amongst our forces for a while, but most still view her as the Ashen Demon. Didu looked off to the side. He could perhaps understand that kind of isolation given his own past. Thank you, my friend, I highly appreciate your support. Now Dmitri just needed to find a way to speak privately with Byleth. He would not blindside her again and make a further mess of things around the camp. His last attempt at that ended very poorly, and he will not make that mistake again. What do you think will happen when we return to the camp? Byleth isn't too sure. They will of course be given a small amount of time to settle back in, and she will get to see her father, Alois, and the other mercenaries again. After that, they could either remain where they are for some time, or they would march forward to take more Adrestian territory. All this traveling is wearing on me, even if it is not doing the same for you. Suthis sighed. I would not object to a break, even for a short while. Byleth isn't sure why Suthis is so tired of it all. It's not like the goddess is doing any of the physical work. Do not get cheeky with me. You might be the one doing the traveling, but I am still experiencing it all. We journeyed a lot, then stayed in a place we did not feel comfortable in, traveled some more, only to also be in a place that made us anxious. After that went back to the first location, and now here we are. Anyone would be exhausted after that. That does make sense. Honestly, I am surprised you are not wearier. We have not known a true moment of peace or rest since the boy took us to his home. Byleth isn't too sure, she is probably just used to all the traveling. Byleth Eisner, a voice said to their right. She looked over and saw one of the attendants before her. She cleared her throat. His Majesty requests your presence at the front. There are matters he wishes to discuss with you before we reach camp. If the woman disapproved of the order, she was doing a good job at hiding it. Byleth nodded her head. Of course, tell King Dmitri I will be there in a moment. The attendant rode away without a reply. What could he want now? And to have someone essentially come and get her, Byleth is not sure what he is planning. Byleth cannot help but be a little nervous. The last time Dimitri brought her to his base camp as part of his schemes, things hadn't exactly gone well for her. At least she would have a warning this time. By the time Byleth reached him, Dimitri and Dido were looking over a map of the area as they rode. He was so focused on the task and watching where he was going that he almost missed spotting her arrival. "Do you need me for something?" Byleth brings her horse beside his and glances at the map. "Yes. I am looking at the different potential routes we could take once the army begins to march again." Dimitri would prefer to have the best options in mind when they have their next strategy meeting. "As you are more familiar with Empire territory, I was hoping to hear your thoughts." Byleth tilted her head to get a look at the map and pointed at one of the roads. "The last time I was in the area, this road wasn't in use. There was a landslide from the nearby mountain and there was a fair amount of debris on the road and surrounding area." She shrugged. "I don't know if it was all cleaned up or not. Given how long it's been, I would usually say it is likely, but with the war and the way the Empire has been treating its citizens, it was probably left as it was," he finished. It disgusted Dimitri how Adrestia had been running things. Thales and the other Agarthans truly hated those who lived in Fodlan, and that was clear to see in their influence on the government they had usurped. Byleth nodded in agreement. "It would be best then to avoid using that road, wouldn't you say, Your Majesty?" asked Dido. "I completely agree. That still left several options though. Do you have any additional thoughts, Byleth?" She focused on the map once more. "I suppose it all comes down to what kind of route you wish to take." At his look of confusion, she continued. "There are quicker routes we could theoretically take, but resources like fresh water and forests to hunt and forage in are sparse. We could take a route that instead offers your army more food and water to find, but it would take us longer to reach our destination," Byleth explained. "I will take your words under advisement." "Dido," Dimitri said, turning towards his friend. "Could you please go see if we have any maps that show what lies between this one and Inver?" Dido bowed. "It will be done at once, Your Majesty." "Lady Byleth, could be please remain here with King Dimitri." Dimitri isn't sure if he feels happier for the time with Byleth, or annoyed that Dido believes he needs to be accompanied by someone. Sure. Once they are left alone, Dimitri realizes this is his chance to discuss his plans with Byleth. They do not get many opportunities to privately converse, and he should not waste this one. "I do not know why he insists on calling me Lady Byleth," his beloved said. "I am not a lady," and told him as much. "He keeps doing it anyway." Byleth shook her head. "I do not understand why he insists on that kind of formality." She looked truly bothered by it all. "Apologies, that is inadvertently my fault." Her head turned sharply to look at him, and Dimitri uncomfortably cleared his throat. "I am sure it will not surprise you, but Dido figured out on his own that there is something between us. He is affording such respect to you, because he feels that if I hold you in high regard, he should as well." "Oh." Sadly, Byleth did not appear to be comforted by his explanation. "I suppose that makes sense." Maybe changing the subject was in order. Byleth might feel better if he distracted her. "Now that we have a moment, there is something I've been wanting to run by you." "What is it?" "When we get back to camp, I would very much like to try to remedy the situation between you and the others." He really hopes she will not object to the idea. "Dido does not object to your company, and I would very much like to make you feel more comfortable around everyone." A selfish part of him also wishes to erase one of the reasons for her not liking being in Fhirdiad. If she was on good terms with the other Blue Lions again, perhaps living in his home would eventually be more agreeable to her. "And how do you plan on doing that?" "If you are okay with it, I would simply like to introduce situations to encourage interaction between you and them. Forcing anyone would not end well. As with Dido, all that I ask of you is to give it a try and not immediately attempt to leave." Byleth looked away from it and towards the road. "I'm not sure that your plan will work, but as long as you promise not to push, I will not go out of my way to avoid anyone." Dimitri couldn't help but smile. "That is all I ask." Dimitri knew that Byleth wasn't one to exaggerate, and he had witnessed his friend's uncomfortableness and indifference regarding her. It was still disheartening to observe those reactions when they returned to the camp. Ingrid, Sylvain, and Felix rushed to greet him and Didu, but he could see their faces slightly fall when they noticed Byleth standing at his side. "Come on, your majesty," Ingrid said as she led him away. "I am sure you must be starving after your journey." "Well, yes, but Sylvain slung an arm around his shoulders. "We should hurry, they are serving goat cheese gratin and it would be a shame to get there after it's all gone." Felix silently followed them, grumbling about wanting to get lunch out of the way so he could get back to training. Dimitri could only helplessly look back when Byleth was left behind as his friends practically dragged him away. "While I would not object to having a meal, I do not believe now is the best time," Dimitri said as he tried to get out from underneath Sylvain's arm. "I only just returned and there are many things that need to be taken care of." Sylvain was not deterred. "Those things can wait a little while. You need to eat, or you won't have then energy to do any of them." That was a fair point. "Besides, it's been a while since we've been able to share a meal," Ingrid added. "We should take advantage of it while we can. Just stop struggling, Boar, neither of us is getting out of this." Like usual, Felix sounded irritated. It did not take them long to get in line for food and then find an empty table. "How were Ferdayat and Gareg Mach? Did any of the nobles give you trouble?" Sylvain asked. Dimitri ate a spoonful of his meal. He couldn't taste it, like usual, but it smelled wonderful, and the texture was pleasant. It was nice to be home. The rebuilding of Gareg Mach is going well, and the nobles caused the usual amount of trouble. His friends didn't need to know the exact nature of their displeasure quite yet. That's good. Ingrid was somehow already on her second portion. "I would hate for there to be a delay in our march because someone at home was causing a fuss. No one wanted that. Where are the others?" Dimitri found it odd that only Felix, Sylvain, and Ingrid were there when he arrived. "Are they busy with something?" Felix pushed his empty bowl to the side. "Ash is out on a scouting mission, though he should be back soon," while Mercedes and Annette got held up in the medical tent. "Mercedes is working and Annette broke something and refuses to leave until it is fixed. The last time I looked, Shay was getting some training in." Sylvain shrugged. "He probably lost track of time. Maybe that was for the best. If everyone ignored his beloved all at once, he might not have been able to hide his displeasure." "Look, Didu is here." Ingrid was looking at the building's entrance, and sure enough Didu was entering, with Byleth a few steps ahead of him. "We are almost done, but it would be nice to talk with him for a bit." They watched as Byleth and Didu got their own food. After Byleth obtained her tray, she sat at an empty table. It made Dimitri sad, but her actions were understandable. What was surprising was that instead of joining them, Didu chose to sit across from Byleth. "What is he doing?" Sylvain looked utterly confused. "Why would he sit with her instead of joining us? The three of us dined together frequently while in Ferdayat." It warmed Dimitri's heart to see at least one of the former Blue Lions not avoiding his beloved. "We are almost done eating, it only makes sense to join someone who has also just grabbed their food." Ingrid and Sylvain looked over at the other table in confusion. "Enough, Didu can eat with whoever he wants," Felix cut in. "Can you all finish so I can leave? I'm honestly surprised that you haven't made more attempts to interact with Byleth yourself, Felix. This might be a good opportunity to endear Byleth to his friends. She is possibly the greatest swordsman I have ever seen, yet you've never challenged her to a spar as far as I am aware." It had truly surprised him when he noticed. Before everything changed, Felix would insist on training with Byleth almost every day. Felix did not answer, but he did cast a thoughtful gaze in Byleth's direction. Ingrid and Sylvain turned away from Byleth and did to start up a new conversation, but throughout the remainder of their meal, Dimitri caught them looking back a few more times. It was a decent start if nothing else. Byleth had been surprised when Didu took the chair opposite of hers when they went to get lunch. They had stayed behind after Dimitri was led away to help unpack some of the supplies. Didu had brought up the idea of getting lunch, but Byleth had expected him to join Dimitri and the others, not her. "You don't need to eat with me," she said. "I am used to eating alone. I know you would probably prefer to join your friends." It really wasn't helping that she could clearly see Sylvain and Ingrid staring at them. "They are almost finished with their meal. You, like me, just got here." Didu began to eat. It makes more sense to share a meal with you. People will talk. Byleth isn't trying to scare Didu off, but she knows that she isn't well liked. She would prefer he not have to deal with any negative fallout for being seen socially with the Ashen Demon. I'm not worth the trouble it could cause you. Didu put down his spoon and looked her directly in the eyes. I appreciate your concern, however, I am a man of Duscur. Even with all that has happened, people will talk regardless of my choice in dining partner. I do not dislike your company and see no reason to leave. Thank you. Byleth honestly hadn't been expecting that. I appreciate it. I don't want pity, I would prefer being alone to that, but that's not what this feels like. Maybe it would be nice to share a meal with someone other than her father while she was in the camp. Byleth and Didu eat in silence. She wasn't bothered about this, neither were very verbose in general. In fact, while in Fhirdiad, Dimitri carried most of their mealtime conversations. The food was good and Didu's silent company was pleasant, so she really had no reason to complain. When he left, Dimitri made sure to say goodbye. Sylvain and Ingrid looked uncomfortable, while Felix appeared strangely thoughtful as they also walked by. Byleth isn't sure what that was about, but she could always ask Dimitri about it later. Perhaps the boy said something, Sothis said thoughtfully. Hopefully he will keep his word and not push anyone towards the outcome he wants. That would be nice. If he is too heavy-handed in his efforts, it could very easily leave her even more isolated than before. She makes everyone uneasy, something Byleth is used to. No one truly dislikes her, they just do not like her. That could easily change if Dimitri pushes too much. While he is single-minded, the boy is not a fool. He might not succeed given how his previous plans regarding you have gone, but he wants things to work out. In light of that, he will tread lightly. He told you of his plan, did he not? That alone is an improvement. It was nice that Dimitri shared his intentions instead of rushing forward. Now they just needed to wait and see how things would unfold. Didu. Footsteps were rapidly approaching them, and Ash was coming up behind her. Did you and King Dimitri just get back? We arrived only a short while ago. Didu was looking between her and Ash. Lady Byleth and I remained behind to help unload the supplies while His Majesty came here to eat. Didu gestured in her direction, to Ash's obvious shock. We were hungry as well, though His Majesty has already left. Ash was looking between her and Didu in confusion, not that Byleth could blame him. Up until the trip to Fhirdiad, Didu avoided her company as much as everyone else. I was told you were on a scouting mission, did that go well? Didu resumed eating. You may sit if you wish, there are plenty of seats. Byleth is avoiding looking at Ash, it would probably just scare him off, but she can only imagine how bewildered he is. If he's going to leave in discomfort or puzzlement, she really wishes he would just get on with it. Come now, you don't know that's what's going to happen. The three of you could have well, not a pleasant meal, but it could still be a good experience. Byleth doubts it, but stranger things have happened. Oh, I'm not sure, I mean that's not to say. You don't have to join us if you don't want to. Byleth turns to look at Ash. She might as well get this over with. I know I make you uncomfortable, so you are under no obligation to stay. Ash looks at her for a moment, an unfamiliar expression on his face. His gaze goes from her to Didu, then back again. You know what, I think I will join you. He smiles, it is strained, but it is a smile, nonetheless. Just give me a moment to get some food. As soon as he walked away, Byleth turned back to Didu. Do you think he would be more relaxed if I left? I could make up some excuse about being called away. Ash was just being nice, or perhaps he didn't want to leave his friend alone with the demon. I would recommend remaining for at least a few minutes, Didu answered. Ash is kind and observant. He knows His Majesty respects you and has now seen that I have no issue with enjoying a meal with you. It is not pity, but perhaps curiosity. Byleth should keep her promise to Dimitri. She wants him to keep his own, so it is only fair. This could end well for you. You'll never know if you do not try, and besides, if things get awkward, you can leave. There is nothing holding you here and you are almost finished eating, Sothis said kindly. Just stay for a short amount of time, and hopefully you can leave a good impression. Check the description for the links to the author.